Hi, Namrata. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am really sorry about that. We just had to close that meeting and join here, so that took us a while. I'm really sorry.
No issues.
We'll wait for 5 minutes. We wait for people to join, or should we start?
Just one person was asking me. He should be
Because there
joining
are,
in now.
I have allowed everyone who was in the waiting room.
Yeah, one more author I know. Yeah, let's begin.
Yeah. Sure. There's nobody else in the waiting room as of now. Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session. Welcome, Priya. Thank you so much for joining us today. So today we are hosting Priya Talwar, a literary agent and founder of Editors Atelier, but that is not one of the reasons why she's here today. She represents Ferdinand Lyngdoh, author of the recently released E.K. Mawlong by Vitasta Publishers. This book is a posthumous release. Ferdinand was a participant at our much-loved creative writing workshop with Chetan, where he worked on this book with Priya. It was eventually released by Vitasta Publishers last month. He passed away in a car accident last year. We have all gathered here today to celebrate this book and his life. Let you know a bit about his background. Growing up in the 80s in Shillong, Ferdinand was fed as many aphorisms as rice. A waterfall became a symbol of evil stepfathers, and a gurgling river signified the madness of a lover. Fascination with stories came of use when the author took over the task of completing the biography of his father, E.K. Mawlong, also the former Chief Minister of Meghalaya. Assistant professor at the College of Community Science, Central Agricultural University, Tura, Ferdinand was also a doctoral scholar who was studying African American and Dalit autobiographies in the Northeastern Hill University, Tura. And a bit about his book and the idea behind it. E.K. Mawlong was a veteran legislator, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, and the Chief Minister for Mawlong. The pursuit of politics was not a chance to make a fortune, but an opportunity to serve the constituents of Umroi. Being a politician enabled him to unburden those who looked up for him for respite. The book explores Meghalaya's formative years and the uncertain politics that witnessed 22 governments in 25 years. Amidst Malong's aspirations to resolve persisting problems and his efforts to bring together the state's regional political entities, compelling questions became apparent. Was he a victim of a conspiracy that ultimately led to the fall of his government? Did his role as a unifier of political parties pay dividends, or was it a wasted opportunity? This is a tale of charming friendships as much as it is about politics brutishness. It's a celebration of a man's determined fight against injustice, and above all, a tribute to a statesman who walked with the kings but never lost the common touch. Priya, thank you so much for joining us. So we'll start, or would you like to share something before we start the session?
Namrata, thank you so very much. It's a pleasure, really. And of course, I think you should start. I think that'll be a much useful way.
Yeah, so let's talk about E.K. Mawlong. As an editor and later on as a literary agent, what were your thoughts about this book? What made you want to represent this story?
It's a very pertinent question, right? Because when I got the manuscript, I had not heard of E.K. Mawlong,
Yeah.
and yet I must say that when I read the first draft, that for me it was the first draft.
Mhm.
Even now, I say that that one quality that hooked me has been retained. It stays, which is it's like it's the simplicity of the times that the leader
Right.
is coming from. And
Mm.
if you have read the book, anybody who would be now reading the book, and please do read the book, you will see that the manner in which Ferdy has written the book is extremely simple. And I feel that, this is primarily a political figure. It could have been that typical story, of a politician with the twists and the turns. But he has written it in a very simple style. And I feel as a reader, as an editor agent, I think that's missing. Simplicity is golden and it stays golden. So the man who lived his life, he always stayed connected to his roots. You really see him helping his people, E.K. Malong, at any hour of the day. And this is a scene from the book, and it has etched in my mind. He always housed the locals, anyone who was in need of any help, right? So Ferdy, as a young boy, he saw so many people from the constituency of Umaroi come in, and the father would never say no, right? Because that was his duty to serve the
Yeah.
people. So I think that is something I would say kind of is rare, when you're especially talking about a politician.
Well, I have been reading this book. I'm in middle of it actually, and I would just like to add that it also kind of reflects the personality of both Ferdy and his father, because I also interacted with Ferdinand when he was joining the workshops. He even when he talks in his stories, there is a certain simplicity which he brings, which is, as you said, it's very rare actually. Yeah. So coming to our next question, from an idea or a rough draft with which Ferdinand had approached you, how did you shape it? How did you shape the entire thing to reach the book, the shape that it has right now? Can you talk about the whole process of editing, the scope, and the work that has gone behind this book, bring it where it is?
So I know you were a writer, Namrata, and you're an amazing writer. If you were to actually talk about the whole process, probably imagine we're spending 6 to 7, maybe, months or years or end. But I'll take you through, the process that we went through. We really did everything a book needs to be a publishable book. So when Ferdy wrote to me first, he said, I ask all authors, what is it that you're looking for? And one of the questions that he was, are you looking for developmental work? Or maybe
Right.
are you looking for polishing only? So he said, Priya, I'm looking for everything to make this book publishable, right? So that's really an editor's dream. So we began with an assessment, which is basically, no edits per se in the manuscript. Then we did a developmental work, which is combined with line editing. From there, we may have spent a few months, like 5, 6 months on this. After that, we decided to pitch it together. Earlier, Ferdy and I were working only as editor author.
Mhm.
So when we started talking, like this is what we should do, I started telling him how it works. He said, madam, why don't you only pitch it? He calls, I think he calls everyone like that, madam, madam
Yeah,
Priya.
yeah, yeah. I remember that. So what would you say is the USP of this book? In the sense, like, we see so many political biographies releasing every week. So what makes this book different and compelling enough for a reader to pick this book according to
Editors and agents ask authors, and this is like, it's like the cycle turning around. I had to really do some homework, because when we do the book blurb, when we do
you?
the book bio, the author bio, we have to answer this question, right? And
Yeah.
you're very right, the market is saturated. We are specifically saying that with biographies, how does it become the book that we should read? And one of the points that we've said, right, it is that life that he lived, simple, and he was a very strong leader. Do you often hear about that kind of, politicians today? No, frankly, we don't. And I would say the USP of this book really, it's, it's another take on what I just said, that it could have been Ferdy writing with vengeance. You have to understand, he
Yeah.
was growing up, he was so young. He saw his father being accused of corruption. He was so young. I remember he told me once that, dad used to come late from work, and I used to
Mm.
keep waiting. I would not sleep. Then, at one point of time, whatever opposition parties were involved, someone was throwing stones at their house. Thank God nobody was there at that time. But he could have written a book out of so much, negativity. And I always tell authors, never ever do that. Even if you're writing a personal story, even if you're writing fiction, and you see today, if you've, even if you've read a few chapters, you know that it remains an objective biography, despite the fact that it is an authorized biography. It is written by the son. You know that it could have gone any which way. It could have been totally given a slant. But we worked together, me, Ferdy, and of course Vitasta, the publisher, which is run by a journalist. So there was no way we would have compromised with that, authenticity and, factual correctness, to say.
Very interesting. Uh, So, what do you want the reader to take away from this book when they finish
I
reading?
wish I wish the publisher was here. Make this easy. So the takeaway is that, uh, you can be very successful, and you can, still face a huge setback in your life. And when you read the life of VK Mawlong chronologically, you understand the hard work he had put in. And when he was when he was accused falsely, as later the Guwahati High Court, acquitted him, he never turned around and became, the
Right.
opposite of what he was. He remained that leader who wanted to take care of his people, right? So in that sense, it just shows, irrespective of whether you are in this field or that field, you can
Hmm.
still choose to live by your values. And you know today that the son that we had met, right, Ferdy,
Hmm.
you've said it yourself. He was simple, he was funny, he was charming, he was witty, he was a beautiful person. Had he not taken it from his father, So it's really an evidence. It's the evidence on the page, and it's also the evidence that you and I have, seen in the person.
So while a lot of publishing houses and commissioning editors state that India does not have a great market for biographies or memoirs, this book being picked up by a traditional house and being released so soon is actually very exhilarating. So your thoughts on this? How was the entire process of pitching, and how was the response?
I'm so glad you're asking me about the process. One was the editorial, right? A few
Yeah.
months of work, editing and all. And when we were talking about, let's Priya have, be the agent, I started working on the book proposal, which now some of the things you're already seeing, in the title, the cover, the blurb, the author bio. We worked very hard on that. And I kind of did make Ferdy's life a little hard for that because I realized the importance of the book proposal, the pitch you're sending to publishers. And yes, we did face lots of rejections, right? But the good thing is, when Renu, replied, she was from the get-go sure of wanting to publish this book, right? So you have to understand, even for the agent on the other side, waiting, which is part of the process for the author, the agent also waits with you. The agent also takes that rejection. Sometimes it gets personal, right? Because I mean, you might say, "Ki it's rejection is not the end of the world," but you have worked on it. It's in some ways like your adopted baby. So you might think, "Boss, what happened wrong? I must have done something wrong." But I think it's part of the process, which I tell every author. So when we got a yes from Vitasta, which is run by Renu, and from there, obviously, lots of things are done by the publisher, right? So they have put all the efforts that any publisher really should, and we're very, very proud and happy to be associated with Vitasta.
A writer not only needs to write a good book, but also be able to market it well. So, any tips you would like to share about marketing a book, especially non-fiction, for a debut writer?
Okay, I think first thing I should say is that don't worry about having to spend lots of money. Marketing is not that popular to contrary perception. All you have to do is you have to be able to, you know, understand it, and this is really very useful for debut authors, fiction, non-fiction, both. If you're starting out with your first book, you have to study. People say
Right.
do market research. All we say is that study carefully, closely, where online
Mm.
and in bookstores, the market of your book. So first is know your genre and subgenre. So when we say genre, everyone understands that. So I'm only going to talk about market research because I feel it's the most useful and sometimes really neglected, especially when you're starting out. People get confused. Yeah, yeah, what is this market research? How do we do it? It's actually manageable. Identify your genre. For instance, if you're writing a book in, say, self-help, even then you will have so many subgenres. Mane,
Right.
if you're talking about a spiritual approach, so it's self-help under spirituality. If you're
Mm.
talking about something that's clinical and you are a doctor, then it's probably under another category. It
Right.
could be self-help and business. Maybe you're an entrepreneur, you're talking about your journey to inspire others. So know your genre and subgenre, and the minute you know that, you have to start to study. You don't have to read everything. You have to study the available competing titles. Any book, any title that competes with your idea. Mane, it may be a book that you wanted to write but did not. It may be a book that you thought was really good, or it may be that book that you think, could have been a little better, but still competes with your idea. Once you know these competing titles, and you'll find them in your bookstores, in libraries, of course, on Amazon, you make a sorted list and start to figure out, this is really market research. What is your book doing new? Are you solving a problem like a business? Are you maybe fulfilling a basic need, or maybe you're fulfilling a desire? And yes, books do that, right? Once you know that, so much of your, lots of efforts that you put in as a writer, I mean, they'll be so much better. You'll be utilizing all the writing, the research, the hours so much better. Some people, what authors, especially in the beginning, they do is that, and it's not their fault. They wouldn't know anything better otherwise. They write their novel, their book, 60,000 words, 70,000 words, written over years. And then they try to figure out, okay, now I want to sell it, publish it. However, the best ideal way, even if you've started writing and you're wondering, can I do the research now? 100% you should. This is the best time if you've started writing your book. So what we're saying is just know your genre, your subgenre, study your competing titles to know eventually what is your book doing in that one sentence. What is your book about in one simple sentence? In films, like they say, when you read a
Yeah.
screenplay, it's called a log line. So when you know that pitch, when you know that book in one sentence, your life, I can promise you, is going to be easier, is going to be much more manageable as an author.
Thanks. That's been very insightful and helpful. So, any tips for authors who want to pitch their nonfiction works?
What I've just said, right? For instance, if I can just go back to Ferdy's book, um, he knew his why, right? He knew his why. As I said, he could have done it with lots of vengeance in his heart. He did not. He wanted to celebrate his father, and he did it in a very fair, objective manner, right? Nobody else would have done that job for him. Yes, he had assigned a team of researchers because there is so much data to compile. So when you know your why from the beginning, it's much more easier to fill all these gaps. And when I say pitch for a book author, it's really the book proposal, right? And what is a book proposal? And this is really the pitch, the proposal that you send to a publisher. Most people think that, okay, sample chapters, okay, synopsis, okay, the bio of the author, etc., etc. Those are the elements that form a book proposal. You may miss one, but what most of us don't understand enough is that a proposal is something that I am proposing to Namrata, for instance, knowing that number one, Namrata can say no. She is not obliged to say yes. Second, I have to give something to Namrata that she values so much that she will want to say, Ki boss Priya, I want to be associated with this. Right? So you're proposing that thing to someone. So maybe it might be a value. It could be something that's maybe measurable. So that's the pitch, that's the proposal. And it's really, if you've done that work, if you've studied your market, if you've done the market research, your job in writing that one sentence pitch and also the proposal is much, much, much easier. It's not like it cannot be done otherwise, but I would rather make the life of an author easier. So do that market research pehle, do the competing titles pehle. And when it comes to the pitch, it takes time. Especially for debut authors, it's not easy. It takes time to get to that level where you're confident about writing not just the pitch of your book, but also for say Namrata's book or for say like my book.
Let's try to make this a little more hopeful for all the writers who are listening. So, what are the donors, or what are you accepting these days? What do you think is publishable or can be represented? What is the kind of work that you're looking for? I'm sure many of the writers in the audience would be very excited to share their work with you then.
So I think my favorite, my personal favorite is creative nonfiction. Having said that, I am interested in anything that's a credible story. Money, it could be fiction, it could be nonfiction, it could be a biography like this one, could be a personal story, just a memoir, which I have done. The last year I had worked on one, a business memoir, in fact. And yeah, I think creative nonfiction, biographies, business books, because business books can be amazingly written stories.
That's interesting. And with that, we come to the end of our questions. We would like to open the floor. Does anyone of you want to ask anything to Priya? Do you have any questions? Anything that you would like to share? You can drop in the chat box, or you can maybe just unmute yourself and share. So, Priya, while we get the questions, I had a question for you because you know that we've been working on this Nielsen bestsellers list that we make at HWR. So I have been collating the data for almost like a year now. In July, it will be a year. So it's just 9-10 months. One thing that I've observed is that not too many nonfiction authors are actually there from India in that list. I'm very curious, and I always ask this question whenever I get an opportunity. What do you think could be the reason? Is it that we find Indian writers who write non-fiction less credible? I mean, like we want to believe somebody who's a Robin Sharma or who's an international writer. We want to believe his advice, though it may or may not be applicable to Indian scenarios, be it personal or be it even business, finance, career, or anything. But we don't want to believe somebody who's an Indian. Is that it? What do you think, in your opinion? What could be the reason for this?
I mean, I think there are two parts to your question, right? Can you just repeat the first part?
Yeah. So what I said is that I don't see a lot of Indian writers in the nonfiction category in the Nelson bestsellers list that we make every week. And one of the questions, obviously that's one question that we don't see. Why we don't see? And the second is, do you think it is because we don't associate credibility to Indian writers, and we want to believe somebody like a Robin Sharma or somebody who's an international writer, though their logic or their reasoning or their knowledge may or may not be applicable in the Indian scenario, be it career, personal life, or anything, but we still want to believe them rather than believe somebody who's an Indian who's actually speaking from maybe a lived experience, because it's a credibility. Like Robin Sharma definitely is a name. That Indian writer is still trying to make a name. So is it that could be one of the reasons you feel?
Very, very interesting question. I think this is something that the whole industry needs to talk about in much more detail. I'll go back to the Nielsen specifically later, but of course, it's not like, the merit is a problem. I don't think so, because frankly, so many books, that you and I have read, enough books that are written by Indian authors that are fiction, non-fiction, and done in a very credible manner. So that would be unfortunate, maybe it's a mindset thing. Uh, what I would rather than say about Nielsen is that, is there a way that we can also discuss, for instance, what is the criteria, right? And do we know enough do authors know enough about how to get into, how to appear in that?
The criteria that we have been told is purely sales. So it's like, agar abhi, like as we speak at this moment, if somebody has bought a book at crossword stores and they scan that barcode, it'll automatically get uploaded on Nielsen's server. It's that in real time. It's pure sales. It's just pure numbers from bookstores, Amazon, Flipkart, across the world. That's how they work. They are just data mining, data analytics. That's all they do. So what we are seeing is pure sales. So if you ask my observation, the only Indian writers who are there on the list are all spiritual leaders. Been writing books, who also write on self-help. There are a lot of books on self-help, but apart from that, say for example, there was an individual who wanted to make it, maybe on spirituality or something, you wouldn't find an Indian writer there in that list. It's all spiritual writers are there. Like you would maybe find Sadhguru, you would find Sri Ravi Shankar, then you would find that Gopal Gaur Das. You will find all these people there, but you can check that list. I can share that link with you later, WhatsApp. But every week that I work, and there is a book that we are working on, me and Chetan. It's like called the Indian Handwriters, Writers Handbook. In that, I've written this observation that it's very interesting to observe this. It's very interesting to see that it's either the spiritual leaders or somebody from outside India who can maybe make it to the bestsellers, but no, not in Indian. Indian writers are very rare. They maybe are there for a week or so, but then they just vanish. In the top 50 at least. They might be there in the top 100 or 500. That's something that's definitely there. I think we have got some questions.
It's very pertinent. I'll try and address it. Is that the fact of the matter is there a clear conclusive evidence that can show that, Indian writers over the, say, history of X number of years have not appeared in a best selling list, which is, like a big list like Nielsen?
No, I would say it's incorrect to say they have not appeared at all. They do. They do appear, but they appear for a very short one. Like they're very brief spurts, like say for example that the Hindu or something, there is a book which has released recently. That book is there for 2 weeks. Now we don't know whether it'll be there for next week or not. Like Veer Sanghvi released his biography. His biography was there for 3 weeks. After that, it just vanished completely. So, that it comes. I'm not saying Indian writers don't come, but it comes very briefly. But what I'm talking about, like Sadhguru's books and all, they're consistently there. And they're consistently there since July till now. I mean, they go up and down in the top 50, but they are there. And then we have Robin Sharma. Robin Sharma has like 3 books, and Sadhguru has like 5 books there. So you were like wondering what's happening? How does it work? I've been able to break through the data analytics of kids writing and fiction, but non-fiction still continues to be a mystery. Okay, so somebody has commented, Namrata, I disagree. Nielsen does not capture
what
full
you just said.
data.
One is profile.
Sorry. Hello.
Yeah. So who is SN? Disagree. Nielsen doesn't capture.
Yeah.
Corporate
Nielsen
buying
doesn't.
is an account.
Yeah, it's corporate buying. It isn't accounted for in Nielsen. Top 50 also has a lot of academic books. That I agree. We actually see that trend every time college reopens, school reopens. We see the English literature topics of Wuthering Heights and all those typical books which we see that students might be given in their curriculum. Their sales peak at a lot of time.
So
So
it's
there's a
related to
question.
timing and TG.
Yeah. There's a question from Danish for you. Can working professionals find time to pick up writing a book from their busy schedules? Or should we plan a long pause from work to be able to do a good job as a debut author?
I would say do the latter, but then I can't say what happens to your job.
Writing does not
No, of
guarantee money,
course,
let's be honest.
working professionals should be able to find time to write a book from despite having, schedules which require you to do your daily job, your course, etc., etc. I know enough people who are doing that. But as Namrata said, making money from your first book, of course, I mean, just you have to be a little more practical, right? It's hard. Writing is the hardest profession, right? But addressing your question, Anish, working professionals, yes, I know working professionals who do take out time to write a book. Yeah. And they do it despite exactly what you're facing right now. Yeah. Itna kaam hai, etc. etc. How do I take out the time? I need to research, I need to write it. Who will help me out? Is it making any sense? It's doable. It's really doable.
Yeah. Karan has actually shared a very interesting question, but he sent it to me in direct message. He's asking, is the market too saturated for authors?
Market is, yes, saturated for all content creators at the moment, but also you're lucky to be in these times. If you're able to write, if writing is what you love, then you can be creating content not just for a book. Book writing is one, right? You can be writing a screenplay, you can be writing scripts for videos, you can be writing content for, say, radio, you can be writing content for OTT platforms, or so many other mediums.
This actually makes me curious. What are your thoughts on self-publishing? Yeah, because now, as you say that, writers have a lot of options. These days, we are not no longer dependent only on traditional publishing route. Like, we don't have to have that long wait of 1.5 year and whatever. These options are always there. So what do you think? Should a writer opt for self-publishing? Is it a good way to start their writing journey? What would you recommend to somebody who's looking to make a debut, say?
It's, I mean, saying a conclusive yes or no is hard because it depends person to person, subject to subject, context to context, timing as well as, has to be factored. But yes, publishing the traditional way takes time. Ferdy and I probably, we were able to do this book in a little less than 2 years, which is also, I mean, even I'm amazed it happened. Publishing the traditional way requires you to have ample patience, right? From pitching of the book to finally seeing the book in your hand sometimes can take years. And it really then again depends, right? It depends that on the topicality as well. So if you have the option of self-publishing, then you can make a very well-informed decision whether this is the best thing for you. It then depends on why, as I kept saying, what is your why do you want to do this book? If it's about celebrating something like, a relative, do you need, say, the validation of a traditional publisher at that point of time? Why? Will that help you at all? So whatever be the reason you're doing, keep that as your soul, as your, maybe your lens. If this is why I want to do this, look at that lens, look it through that lens, and then try and make that decision, make a very well informed decision that, okay, the factors will remain the same. Traditional publishing likely to take X number of years, likely to, not have you invest as such, maybe sometimes in marketing, right? So time is there, the process is there. Yes, you will get someone who's working on your book in terms of editorial, right? Then you know that in self-publishing, they don't really work on the book's editing per se, which means that lots of other things, lots of the publishers' arms, right, the traditional publishers' arms, they're outsourced in a self-publishing platform. You may outsource a lot of your work, but do you want to? Do you care about it that much? Why are you doing it? Do you want to put so much effort, outsourcing a lot of these things? Unless, of course, you know how to typeset, you know how to design a book cover, you know how to do a little bit of the publicity. So all of these things, all of these factors will be available online, and it's easy to find out. But the one thing that's not available online is, and even with an agent or an editor or you, is that why do you care? Why are you doing this book? Why are you putting so much work into it? Why do you want to go through that? I mean, there are lots of things that we can discuss, the specifics in terms of self-publishing. What do they do? How much do they charge? Why do they charge? What happens when they publish my book? Do they do the publicity? Do they do the marketing, etc., etc.? How does it all work? How do I find it? Are they good enough? The answers really are, if you find it difficult, especially for debut authors, who is this hybrid publisher? How do I know? Fair question, because even the hybrid publishers are fairly new right now. So how do you begin to understand what is the value of the work they're doing? What are you bringing to them? What are they bringing to you? So it's as simple as studying, like we were talking about market research. Study their books a little bit online. Maybe buy a copy or two. Look at the cover. If there are so many typos, then do you even want to be associated? Some hybrid publishers, however, contrary to public opinion, they're amazing at what they do. And they're run by publishers who earlier were, in traditional publishing setup. So they understand the value of each arm of the publishing house, from editing to cover design, etc.
That's been very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? Anything else that you might want to ask?
I actually wanted to ask you,
Sure.
are you working on a book right now?
Yes, I'm working on a historical fiction.
Nice. That's the hardest, I think.
Yeah, and it's actually been
Genre
3 years. It's been 3 years that I've been working on it, and it's based on partition. It's a partition drama for 4 generations. So, interestingly, I have actually got friends in Pakistan who have volunteered to beta read to ensure the authenticity of the locations and places and all, and they've shared pictures and all, because, and it's very weird when I tell this to everyone, but I got this as a dream. And I had to literally like get up at 3 a.m. I remember to just note down the outline, because it seemed like that person just wanted to speak to me and wanted me to write this. I knew the name of a village I've never heard of before. I knew the name of a place, a year, and things were so bizarre. And when I just spoke to that friend in Pakistan, she was also surprised. She was like, "That's such a small village. How did you even read about it? Like nobody talks about it. We know Lahore, we know Karachi. Nobody knows about it." I said, "No, there is a village like this on the outskirts of Lahore, and you need to find out if you can find somebody, and if it's still there, if his name changed, because internet does not throw anything out for me." And so it's very bizarre, but yeah, I'm trying to work on that.
That's the thing you guys get to do, man. Like one day, if I have a team, I can guarantee you, I'm not working on this as a book.
Sure.
Well, hats off, I'm very, very excited. Historical fiction is something that I love. In fact, the first book that I acquired as an in-house editor was historical fiction.
Wow.
So I understand the massive amount of research you do, and yet you are not putting that research on the page because it's fiction, it's not non-fiction.
Absolutely.
So I understand it's fucking incredible what you have to do for a genre like this. Sorry for my language.
Thank you. Thank you. So anybody else would like to talk? I can see, okay, Karan has thanked us for the answer.
Thank you, Karan.
So anything else, Priya, that you would like to share with us, or otherwise we can just wrap up this session?
I think yes. This has been very, very exciting. Very, very. It was fun talking to you as always.
Absolutely, it was fun, and I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and have a great weekend. Thank you. Take care. Thanks, Priya.
Enjoy the weekend, guys. Thank you.